I pulled into my parents' driveway, the familiar weight of exhaustion settling over me like a lead blanket. 6 months of chemotherapy had taught me to measure energy in precious increments, and I'd already spent most of today's allotment on my morning treatment at Metropolitan Cancer Center. The steroid flush in my cheeks made me look healthier than I felt, which had become both a blessing and a curse. At 29, I should have been focused on my marketing career and weekend plans with friends. Instead, I was scheduling my life around infusion appointments and blood draws, managing side effects that ranged from debilitating fatigue to the cruel irony of steroid-induced weight gain that made people assume I was getting better. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. Lab results look good. See you Thursday for cycle 4 of 6. You're doing great, Sarah. I managed a small smile. At least someone believed in my strength. There she is. Mom's voice carried across the living room as I stepped inside. Looking much better. I told you this whole thing was overblown. My stomach clenched. We were 30 seconds into the visit, and she was already dismissing 6 months of aggressive chemotherapy for stage 3 lymphoma. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I accepted their brief hugs, noting how Mom's eyes immediately went to my face, cataloging evidence to support her preferred narrative. Your color is so much better, she announced. And you've put on weight. That's wonderful news. The weight gain was from prednisone, a steroid that had bloated my face and added 20 pounds to my frame while my body fought to survive. But explaining that would only trigger another lecture about how real sick people looked different. How was work today? Dad asked, settling into his recliner. Actually, I had treatment this morning, I said carefully. I'm doing a reduced schedule at work during chemo weeks. Treatment? Mom's eyebrows rose skeptically. Still? I thought you said this would only last a few months. Lymphoma treatment typically runs 6 months, I explained, though we'd had this conversation countless times. I'm in cycle 3 now, so I'm halfway through. Lymphoma, she repeated like she was testing the word's validity. That's not really cancer though, is it? It's more like an infection. I closed my eyes briefly, summoning patience I didn't have. Lymphoma is cancer, Mom. It's cancer of the lymphatic system. But you don't look like a cancer patient, she pressed. Remember Aunt Helen? She was bald, skeletal. Look, it's normal. Healthy even. There was the comparison that had haunted me since my diagnosis. Aunt Helen had fought breast cancer with visible, dramatic symptoms that no one could question. My lymphoma was an internal battle, fought with precision drugs that targeted cancer cells while leaving my hair intact and my appearance deceptively normal. Different cancers respond differently to treatment, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. My oncology team uses a targeted therapy approach. Oncology team? My brother Kevin laughed from the kitchen doorway, still wearing his scrubs from his job as a medical technician. Listen to you with all the fancy medical terms. What's next? You're going to start claiming you need a port or something. I unconsciously touched the spot on my chest where my port sat hidden beneath my sweater, the medical device that had made my biweekly chemo infusions possible for the past 4 months. I do have a port, I said quietly. Come on, Sarah. Kevin rolled his eyes. Ports are for serious cancer patients. People who are actually dying. The words hit like a physical blow. What Kevin didn't know was that without treatment, my stage 3 lymphoma had a median survival rate of 2 years. What none of them knew was that I'd been managing this nightmare completely alone, because every time I tried to share the reality of my situation, they minimized it into non-existence. Dinner's ready. Mom called as if we hadn't just been discussing whether my cancer was real enough to warrant medical intervention. We gathered around the table where I'd shared countless family meals, but tonight the familiar setting felt like hostile territory. I picked at my food, my appetite suppressed by the anti-nausea medications that were keeping me functional. You're not eating much, Dad observed. That's not like you. Chemo affects appetite, I explained. The medications. Oh, please, Kevin interrupted. You look like you've been eating plenty. He gestured at my steroid-swollen face. Maybe a little too much. The conversation only got worse as the evening progressed. Every symptom I'd experienced, every adjustment I'd made to accommodate treatment, every sign that I was fighting for my life, all of it was reframed as evidence that I was either lying or overreacting. Real cancer patients lose their hair, Mom announced over dessert as if delivering a medical verdict. They get thin, they look sick. You just look tired. Maybe a little stressed. Mom, I am tired. I'm exhausted. I spend 3 days after each treatment barely able to get out of bed. That sounds like depression, she replied with authority. Have you considered that this might all be psychological? Sometimes when people want attention, they convince themselves they're sicker than they are. I stared at her, wondering if this was really the same woman who had nursed me through childhood illnesses with infinite patience and concern. I have medical records, I said slowly. Biopsy results. Imaging studies showing the tumors. Tumors? Kevin scoffed. Now it's tumors? I thought you said lymphoma. Lymphoma presents as enlarged lymph nodes, which are technically tumors, I explained, feeling like I was defending my existence. See, that's what I mean, Mom said, turning to Dad. She's using all this medical language, making everything sound more dramatic than it is. Enlarged lymph nodes could be anything. A cold, allergies, stress. The biopsy confirmed malignancy, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Malignancy is just a scary word doctors use, Kevin said with the confidence of someone who'd taken a few medical terminology courses. It doesn't necessarily mean cancer. I pulled out my phone and showed them my chemotherapy schedule, the detailed calendar that had governed my life for 6 months. This is my treatment plan. 6 cycles of R-CHOP chemotherapy. It's the standard protocol for stage 3 lymphoma. Mom glanced at the screen dismissively. Chemotherapy is what they give everyone now. It's like antibiotics. They throw it at everything whether you need it or not. That's not how oncology works, I said, my composure finally cracking. They don't give chemotherapy for fun. The side effects are serious. What side effects? Dad asked. You seem fine to us. I looked around the table at their expectant faces, realizing they genuinely couldn't see what the past 6 months had cost me. They couldn't see the bone-deep fatigue that made walking upstairs feel like climbing a mountain. They couldn't see the neuropathy in my fingertips that made simple tasks difficult. They couldn't see the constant nausea that I managed with medications, or the anxiety that came with fighting for your life while the people who were supposed to support you questioned whether you were really sick. The weight gain everyone keeps commenting on? I said, my voice shaking. It's from steroids that prevent severe allergic reactions to the chemo drugs. The healthy color in my face. Also steroids. The fact that I still have hair. My specific drug protocol targets lymphoma cells without causing total hair loss. So you're admitting you're not actually that sick, Mom said triumphantly. If you were really fighting cancer, you'd look like Aunt Helen did. I am fighting cancer, I said, standing up abruptly. I have been fighting cancer alone for 6 months because every time I try to tell you how hard this is, you decide I'm either lying or attention-seeking. Sarah, sit down, Dad said uncomfortably. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma in March. I've had 12 chemotherapy treatments, countless blood draws, CT scans, PET scans, bone marrow biopsies. I've been doing this alone because you've convinced yourselves it's not real. If it was real, Kevin said coldly, you'd be sicker. You'd be in the hospital. You'd look like a cancer patient. I am a cancer patient. The words came out louder than I intended, but I was past caring about volume control. The room fell silent for a moment before Mom spoke again, her voice tight with annoyance. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This emotional outburst, this need to be the center of attention. Healthy people don't behave this way. Healthy people don't have cancer, I replied, grabbing my purse. And cancer patients don't need to prove they're sick enough for their family's support. I was halfway to the door when Kevin called after me. Where are you going? You can't just leave because we're asking reasonable questions. Reasonable questions? I turned back, my hand on the doorknob. You're not asking questions. You're denying reality. There's a difference. The doorbell rang at exactly that moment, interrupting our standoff. Through the front window, I could see Dr. Martinez standing on the porch, flanked by 2 people in business attire. My heart stopped. Dr. Martinez never made house calls unless something was catastrophically wrong. I opened the door with trembling hands, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Dr. Martinez? What are you doing here? Sarah, I apologize for showing up unannounced, he said, his expression serious but not alarmed. May I come in? I have some people I'd like you to meet, and after our conversation today about your family situation, I thought this might be beneficial timing. Behind him stood a distinguished woman in her 50s and a younger man with a tablet and professional camera equipment. Of course, I said, though confusion was written all over my face. As they entered the living room, my family's expressions shifted from annoyed to curious to concerned. The presence of medical professionals in their home was changing the atmosphere rapidly. I'm Dr. Elena Martinez, she said, addressing the room with professional authority. I'm Sarah's lead oncologist at Metropolitan Cancer Center, and I specialize in hematological malignancies. Mom's face went pale at the word oncologist. This is Catherine Walsh, President and CEO of Metropolitan Hospital System, Dr. Martinez continued, and James Chin from our Public Relations Department. Ms. Walsh stepped forward with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to running major medical institutions. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to personally meet the family of one of our most remarkable patients. Remarkable patient? Dad's voice was barely audible. Sarah has been fighting an extremely aggressive form of stage 3 lymphoma since March, Ms. Walsh explained. What makes her case remarkable isn't just her courage, but her response to treatment despite facing this battle without family support. The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Martinez opened her medical tablet. Sarah's initial diagnosis was quite serious. Stage 3 diffuse large B-cell lymphoma with multiple involved lymph node regions. Without immediate and aggressive treatment, her prognosis would have been very poor. How poor? Mom whispered. Median survival of 18 to 24 months without treatment, Dr. Martinez replied matter-of-factly. With treatment, we're looking at cure rates above 85%, which is why we moved so aggressively with the R-CHOP protocol. Kevin had gone completely white. R-CHOP. It's one of the most intensive chemotherapy regimens we use, Ms. Walsh explained. Rituximab, cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin, vincristine and prednisone. The side effects are significant, which is why Sarah's been experiencing the weight gain, fatigue and other symptoms she's mentioned. But she looks fine, Mom protested weakly. That's actually remarkable, Dr. Martinez said. Most patients on this protocol look much sicker than Sarah does. Her body's response has been exceptional, which is part of why we'd like to feature her story. James Chin stepped forward. We're producing a documentary about young cancer patients who fight their battles without traditional family support. Sarah's story is both inspiring and, unfortunately, more common than people realize. Documentary? Dad asked. Ms. Walsh nodded. Sarah's case will be presented at the International Oncology Conference next month as an example of patient resilience. Her medical team nominated her after learning she's been managing this entire experience alone. Not alone, Dr. Martinez corrected. Sarah has built an incredible support network through her treatment team, social workers and other patients. But yes, she's navigated this without family involvement, which makes her strength even more remarkable. We had no idea, Mom said, tears starting to form. She never told us it was this serious. Actually, I said quietly, I tried to tell you many times. You just decided I wasn't sick enough to believe. Ms. Walsh consulted her notes. Dr. Martinez mentioned that Sarah's family had questioned the validity of her diagnosis. That's actually something we encounter frequently, which is why patient advocacy has become so important to our hospital system. The family questioned her diagnosis? James Chin asked, his pen poised over his notepad. They've spent months telling her she doesn't look sick enough to have cancer, Dr. Martinez explained. Despite having her medical records, treatment schedules, and clear evidence of aggressive disease requiring immediate intervention. The room felt like it was closing in on my family. Can you explain, Ms. Walsh asked my parents directly, why you felt qualified to contradict oncological expertise regarding your daughter's cancer diagnosis? The question hung in the air like a judgment that couldn't be appealed. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, while Kevin stared at his hands, probably remembering every dismissive comment he'd made about my fake cancer. We thought she would look sicker, Mom stammered. Like my sister Helen did with breast cancer. Different cancers present differently, Dr. Martinez explained patiently. Lymphoma patients often maintain their appearance better than those with solid tumors. That doesn't make their disease less serious or less life-threatening. Ms. Walsh made a note on her tablet. This is exactly the kind of medical misinformation we're trying to combat. Too many families dismiss cancer diagnoses because patients don't fit their preconceived notions of what cancer looks like. The irony, Dr. Martinez continued, is that Sarah's ability to tolerate treatment so well is actually a sign of her incredible strength, not evidence that she isn't really sick. James Chin had been quietly documenting the conversation. Ms. Thompson, would you be willing to speak on camera about fighting cancer without family support? Your story could help other young patients who face similar dismissal from their families. I looked at my parents who were both crying now and at Kevin, who hadn't said a word since learning about my actual prognosis. Yes, I said firmly. I think it's important for families to understand that cancer doesn't always look like they expect it to. Ms. Walsh stood to leave. Sarah, your final treatment is scheduled for next month, correct? Yes. Dr. Martinez says my scans are looking very good. Excellent. We'd like to present your case as a success story at the conference. Not just medically, but as an example of patient advocacy and resilience. After the medical team left, my family sat in stunned silence. The business cards and contact information scattered on the coffee table served as physical evidence that everything they'd dismissed for 6 months was devastatingly real. Sarah, Mom finally whispered, we're so sorry. We didn't understand. You didn't want to understand, I corrected. There's a difference between not knowing and choosing not to believe. What can we do? Dad asked. How can we help now? I considered the question carefully. 6 months of fighting alone had taught me to rely on myself and the medical team that actually believed in my strength. You can start by believing me when I tell you something, I said. And maybe educate yourselves about what cancer actually looks like before deciding whether someone is sick enough to deserve your support. Kevin finally spoke. Sarah, I'm sorry. I had no idea. The information was available, I replied. You just decided your opinion mattered more than medical expertise. The documentary would air 3 months later, featuring my story alongside other young cancer patients who'd faced family denial. By then my treatment would be complete and my scans would show no evidence of disease. But the real cure had happened that night, not just for my cancer but for my need to prove my worth to people who should have believed in me from the beginning.